The the research that I looked at on this paper was in regards to the Common Core standards and the PARCC testing. The reason that I chose PARCC was simply because it's the testing method that's been adopted in Massachusetts. And what I was trying to determine was whether or not states should agree to adopt the Common Core standards, and whether or not PARCC testing should be used to determine student achievement. The Common Core is a new curriculum framework that was recently formed in regards to, or as a reaction to, the failures of the No Child Left Behind Act. What it did was it nationalized standards in English and mathematics for each state to have the same standards as opposed to No Child Left Behind. Looking at No Child Left Behind, they'd let the states decide their own standards, and by 2014, the expectation was that everybody was going to be proficient, and 100% of students would be proficient in English, language arts, and math. When that obviously wasn't going to happen and the goal wasn't going to be met, a new form of standards was introduced that states could adopt in place of their current frameworks. A lot of this was tied to Race for the Top money. In order to get the Race for the Top money, a lot of states would have to agree to sign on to No Child Left Behind. When it came out, there was 43 states that adopted the Common Core standards, Massachusetts being one of them, along with 4 territories, the District of Columbia, and the Department of Defense, who agreed to go with these standards. PARCC, or the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers, is the testing system that's going to be put in place in Massachusetts to determine whether or not students have mastered the standards that have been put in place. There are assessments from K through 12, so starting in kindergarten and going through 12th grade. There are tests that would be taken each year to determine whether or not students are on pace and making progress towards the ultimate goal. This is high stakes testing, which would indicate that in order for a student to graduate from high school, that they would in fact need to be able to successfully pass the PARCC assessment. After looking at a lot of the information that was out there, the arguments for and against this, the conclusion that I came up with was that states should absolutely adopt the Common Core standards. However, at this point, the high stakes PARCC testing should not be the ultimate test to determine whether or not a student graduates from high school. So the two of these ideas don't have to be connected, and it's not a one-for-one situation. The Common Core should be adopted by states. However, again, PARCC is definitely, or the high stakes testing is something that should be reconsidered. The first argument in favor of the Common Core standards is that simply that the current system that we have is not working. This is evidenced by the fact that, according to a number of studies, the students in the United States who are graduating from high school at this point in time are not ready for college or ready for a career. When looking at some statistics, the National Assessment Governing Board indicates only 40% of students are actually ready for their first year of college. The ACT has also done a study on this, and their numbers are are definitely more disturbing when they're saying that only 1 out of 4 students are actually ready for an entry-level college course. They do define college ready as being ready with very little transition to adapt to an entry-level college course. The need at this point in time is for, and this is what the Common Core tries to do, is try just to focus on skills that are appropriate to the 21st century and 21st century learning and 21st century jobs. The idea that students need to memorize a lot of information, which in a lot of ways is how the frameworks worked under No Child Left Behind, isn't true. Most students have access to information right at their fingertips with their smartphone or some sort of Wi-Fi device, that they don't need to memorize information anymore, but instead they need to be able to access information and be able to read it once they get there. The Common Core also promotes equity. The previous system had allowed states to create their own standards to determine proficiency, which basically takes 50 states and has them all going in a different direction as to exactly what proficient is. These different levels led to different levels of achievement. You can't have 50 different ways to do something and all expect that everybody at the end is going to be in the same place, which is what No Child Left Behind did. For example, you could be a student could be living in one state, say Massachusetts, with higher standards, and move to another state and all of a sudden be exceptional. Or worse, a student could move from a school or a state or a district that had lower standards and be considered proficient there, and then move to a state like Massachusetts and all of a sudden find out that, you know what, actually I'm not proficient in things. The fact that states can play with their standards really allows for states to play with the tests in order to reach proficiency. No Child Left Behind said that every state and every student had to be proficient by 2014. Well, allowing states to do this and handle their testing and handle their standards, if a state wasn't meeting the level of proficiency, a state would easily be able to just lower their standards to make more people proficient. By nationalizing standards, they don't have the ability to play with proficiency and standards, and everybody across the board, no matter what state you live in today or maybe move to next week, everybody's going to be judged at this same level. By creating this level of this standard level across the country, you don't have to worry about certain groups being neglected. When different standards exist, tends to be the disadvantaged that suffer from these things because they're kind of looked past. The other hope with the Common Core is that it's going to keep students in school. With dropout rates, especially in inner cities and struggling communities, for students in poverty being what they are and being higher, the idea that students are going to be monitored on a common set of skills should allow for these skills to be taught and to be mastered at an earlier age, and any deficiencies a person may have to be noticed earlier. By teaching these skills and not worrying about content, okay, teaching skills will allow students who struggle in the future, knowing at an early age that a student is struggling with reading skills, and being able to monitor that year to year, not waiting for a 5th grade MCAS, an 8th grade MCAS, a 10th grade MCAS. By monitoring every year, you should be able to flag any problems a student's having earlier, which will keep them in school longer. One of the areas that the studies have shown is an issue is in rural communities where parents don't have the means for preschool, early childhood interventions. With this monitoring from year to year under the Common Core and mastery of skills, these students will hopefully be able to stay in school longer and not drop out, because by the time they get to high school, they should have the skills that they need in order to be able to compete. That may or may not happen without Common Core. As far as opposition, there is not only opposition, there always has been, but the opposition is actually growing with the Common Core. When support came out, the numbers were as high as 65 to 68% of the public who was polled was in favor of the Common Core. At this point in time, well, it's still a majority of the population. Only 53% of the population actually say they support Common Core. Bills have been introduced in state legislatures to get rid of the Common Core standards in their states. Again, a lot of states signed on to this to get Race to the Top money, and now legislatures are trying to pull out of it. 400 bills have been introduced to prevent the Common Core from being put in. A lot of this opposition may come from the fact that there is a fear that higher standards with testing, high-stake testing, will lead to fewer diplomas. People look at New York as the example. They have already rolled out the Common Core. Their scores have dropped by 30%, which is an alarming number. A lot of people are waking up today after the Common Core has come in and saying, wait a second, or they're being told that their kid isn't as smart as they thought they were, which causes a lot of panic for individuals. Now, the fact that high stakes testing is involved with this is where a lot of the panic comes in from. The Common Core as an idea is a fantastic idea. Unfortunately, because there is testing that's associated with it, people are now saying the Common Core is the problem. It's not. The problem comes with the fact that there is a test at the end that's going to determine everything. The Common Core is good ideas. It allows for a number of skills to be taught that's going to get American students ready for the job or college. In order to save the Common Core and implement it in states, states should get away from the high stakes testing that goes along with the PARCC, or at the very least, if they're not going to get away from the actual high stakes testing, there needs to be another means of achieving the high school diploma. There are a number of options that this could take. There could be a tiered diploma system, meaning depending on where you graduate and the standards you meet, you get a different diploma. This is a lot like what happens in college with the magna cum laude, the summa cum laude, or just a regular diploma. There are different diplomas that allow for what the student has achieved to be noted. Another option is a diploma or a diploma plus. A diploma meaning that they've achieved a typical traditional high school diploma. The diploma plus would indicate that they've mastered these additional 21st century skills. It would allow for colleges and employers to understand again if the student has a basic knowledge, a basic traditional education, or if they've mastered these new standards. In New York, they've implemented a certificate of completion, which basically says to an employer that they've managed to get through 12 years of high school and have met certain job-ready standards. The certificate of completion wouldn't be able to get a student into college or the military, but it would say to an employer that they have managed to accomplish certain skills in their college career. In their high school career. Again, that being said, the Common Core and the high stakes testing do not need to go together, and they shouldn't be tied together. There is a way that the two can coexist. The Common Core as a teaching method is a fantastic idea. Everybody will be on an even playing field across the country, and the appropriate standards will be taught to get people in this country career and college ready. The testing, on the other hand, if it's going to be tied, it needs to be altered. It probably doesn't need to be tied to the standards. You can have one without the other.